Jerry
Nice.
Schatzberg, director of Panic in Needle Park, is in
Yeah,
the same apartment that he moved into when he was making the Panic in
I
Needle
love
Park.
it.
Like I went to interview him there, and I was like,
Oh,
"You've lived
great.
here how long?" And he said, "Thank God for rent control." And I was like, "Wow,
Oh, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
And he, I mean, God bless him. I mean, he's 95, but
yeah."
he's very youthful. Like when you watch
He
him in
is.
interviews, like he to me, I'm perhaps seeing him in person is a different story, but seeing him on film, I mean, he looks like he's in his early
Oh,
70s,
yeah,
maybe,
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, he's and again, like I said with Oliver Stone, terrific memory. Still tells these stories like they were yesterday, which is all you want when you're researching a book. And the thing about Schatzberg too that blows my, because like I said, I went to his home to talk to him. You know, this was his second career. Like he had this
Yeah,
whole other
photography. Yeah.
60s career as a portrait photographer and a fashion photographer, and
Right.
like photograph like iconic images of like the Rolling Stones, and he's
Oh,
doing
yeah.
album covers, like the Blonde on Blonde album cover is that's him.
Yeah.
um
His
a
photography
lot
is incredible.
Yeah, a lot of those images of Dylan in the Goes Electric period, like that's all Schatzberg stuff. And when I went to visit him, we finished the interview, and he was telling me about an art exhibition he had coming up in Paris the next year. And he said, "Come into my studio, I'll show you how it's going to lay out." Which I was, "Oh, great, let's go look." But then, like as we're talking, I just sort of glance over, and he's got like one of the most famous Dylan 65, 66 images, just like sitting on the floor, like a big poster board, just like leaned up against the wall, the way you would just throw like some casual shit you had around the house. And I'm like, right, this dude is a legend. Right.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow, that is really really incredible. No, this is a terrific film. Obviously it's on really about what it is to be a drug addict. What do you think the film is also essentially about from your point of view?
I mean, it's very much just about being a hustler, and that's, I think, one of the things that makes it a sort of timeless New York story is it's just about like getting by in the city.
Mm,
It's about scraping enough money together to get your next meal, finding a couch that you can cop a squat on for a while. It's about sort of the grind of city life in a way that doesn't change,
right.
and I think that is why it doesn't feel so much like a period piece.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. I mean, I've seen this film so many times, and every time I see it, I always see something new. And I think that's because of the way it's edited is incredible to me because it has this there are some scenes that are very very short and they end abruptly and they begin sometimes in the middle of the scene
Yep.
that follows, so you got to really pay attention, or it has that energy of the hustler just going
Yeah,
and going and going.
and it immerses you in this scene. Like it doesn't pause for like proper introductions of characters. You have to
No,
kind of
no.
figure out who
Yeah,
everybody is by the way they relate to each other, and then you're sort of like, oh well, that's that guy. You have to kind
exactly.
of you have the Kitty Winn character as an entry point because you're coming into the story with her, but you kind of have to figure all this stuff out as she does, which I
Oh,
think is
absolutely.
is is always a compelling way to tell a story.
No, I agree, and I just want to mention the editor, because the editor on he did such a phenomenal job. Evan A. Lotman, just to illustrate, my point. For example, when he and his brother Bobby as Pacino and his brother Hank, played by Jeremy Bright, are doing that robbery, and Bobby is saying Hank, calling out his name, and you see that officer just in shadow,
Hmm.
and he's getting closer, and then it cuts to suddenly Bobby just in jail in a
Yep.
shower.
Yep. We know. We know what happened in between,
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But for it made me think a movie like this makes me think about editing in general, and it was something I hadn't thought of perhaps consciously enough, was that often when a scene will end, a character will walk out, or it will hold on a person's face, or a music cue
Right.
will come in. And so it gives the audience that feel, okay, the scene is ending and we're moving on to the next scene. And this film, I mean, it's not that it's like it's not that it's so all over the place, but a scene like that, audiences, I think, often are not used to that. And I think,
Yeah.
I remember when I saw this actually for the first time when I was 16, and my father was watching it with me, and I was feeling uncomfortable watching it with him.
Sure.
Naturally,
Sure.
the drug addiction, the
Yeah.
drug scenes, and it's a difficult, it's a tough film. And I remember at a certain point, he said to me, I don't think this film, there's something wrong. Like, I don't, because we're just watching it on TV. He thought that it was not put together correctly.
Right.
Because he's used
Yeah.
to more
But
conventional film.
but the whole film has to have that sort of like off kilter,
Absolutely, yeah.
strong energy. And you're right, that's a really effective way to impart that to an audience, to not know what to expect, because
Exactly.
you're sort of
Yeah.
you're eliminating some of the visual language that
Yeah.
they've grown accustomed to.
Yeah.
One of the other things that I think is really, that always brings me back to it, in terms of the reality of it, and that sort of almost, documentary realism that we've discussed. This was Schatzberg's second movie.
Right.
He did an earlier one with Adam Hollander called Puzzle of a Downfall Child, which is a good film, which is worth seeing.
Yes. I like that quite a bit.
Yeah. But it's very much the first film of a fashion photographer, because they tell you, write what you know, do what you know, tell a story that you're comfortable with. So it is about a fashion model.
Right.
It's very much in that milieu that he was familiar with. And the look and feel and style of that film reflects that world. It's very slick.
Absolutely.
It's very sleek. It's very professional. And one of the things I like about Schatzberg as a filmmaker was, he said, okay, well, for the next one, I want to do something that's 180 degrees from that. I want to make something that's not staged, that's not slick, that's grubby and captured and handheld. But one of the things that we talked about that he specifically said after that first movie was, he said, I don't want to shoot on sets anymore. I don't like, it's too false to shoot a movie on a constructed set on a soundstage. I don't like that. And so he made a point of that every single scene in Panic in Needle Park is shot on a real location.
Yes. Yeah.
I think with these characters that matters. I think with this story, you can tell that there's a way that poverty is constructed in Hollywood filmmaking, or even in New York filmmaking. There is an artifice to the way a set builder, a set dresser, an art designer creates the apartment of a drug addict that just is different than the way a real apartment feels.
Right.
And the specific detail that I mentioned to him, and that it's weird how you seize on particular, just tiniest things in a movie that you always think of when you think of that movie. But I have lived in a fair number of shitty New York rental apartments.
Right.
The way the walls look in this movie, in those apartments, because they've been painted over with just like a coat of the cheapest white paint every time a tenant moves out. And these places have such a high turnover that, by the 70s, these are pre-war buildings. There's 30 coats of white, of shitty, not built to last white paint on all of
and
those
all
walls.
the cracks in the walls.
All the cracks in that paint, all the peeling, all just the wear and the weather, the things that apartment has seen. That's not a thing that you can construct on a set.
Right.
That's
exactly.
You have to go find. And then an actor in that environment responds accordingly. And an actor acts differently when they're in a real place, as opposed to when they can look 3 inches to the left and see, the soundstage.
Right.
I think that's a huge part of why this movie feels the way that it feels, is because of that sort of that commitment to authenticity and location. And then also, and Holender and I talked about this at length, one of the things that they were really striving for in Midnight Cowboy, and that he, returned to in this, was how they were going to capture street scenes, even with dialogue, without locking down a street and putting extras in place and so forth, to try to insert their characters into everyday life in the city, and not have anyone know that they're making a movie. And this is a recurring thread through the book. Like everybody was always clear back to the jazz singer, to the crowd in the
Yeah.
1920s,
Hiding the camera.
hiding the camera in laundry carts, in
Yeah.
bread trucks, using long lenses, all this sort of thing. It was harder to do in those days because of the limitations of the technology. But by the late 60s and early 70s, when Holender was lensing Midnight Cowboy in this, film stocks had become fast enough and cameras had become lightweight enough that they could do handheld stuff on the street the way that the French New Wave auteurs were, that they could hide a camera 2 blocks away and lenses were good enough that they could put a long lens in it and just get characters walking down the street having a dialogue scene using radio mics, that kind of thing. Anytime again that they could take advantage of the real location that they had, of the real world that they had access to, and the real world that these characters were based in, that this was a film that was based on a photo essay that was about the real junkies of Needle Park. Anything that they could do to put them into that environment was going to be beneficial to the actors and was going to be beneficial to the film. And they were constantly looking for ways to do that, to bring that reality into this fictional narrative.
Well, I like this quote from Schatzberg in the book, was that he said to Hollander, I want it to feel as though we just placed the camera here, hit record, and walked away. Yeah. And obviously it doesn't feel like they just did that, but
sure.
Sorry, I mean, obviously they didn't just do that, but it's certainly, it does feel like it's these are just happy accidents, one after another. I mean, for example, as soon as you see Pacino as Bobby, when Helen gets out of the hospital, he's talking to this guy on the street corner. I'm like, there's no way that guy was like a background. And you actually hear the dialogue. He's like, oh, I'll see you later, or whatever he says. I was really, after reading the book, I mean, this is the beauty of your book. And again, people watching Fun City Cinema, it will really enrich your New York film watching, because I was looking at all those things too, the walls, the fact that there's no music at all, there's no score, the colors, everything, it's very, it's dark brown, it's dark green, it's dark blue. There's hardly, it could have, literally have been a black and white film. What I find, what I was really interested more so when I first saw the film, when I was younger, of course, I was, just I'm sure like yourself, just loving and wanting to see everything with Pacino and really interested in those roles. But Kitty Winn here as Helen.
Holy
what
shit.
A performance!
It's an incredible performance. I mean, it was the performance that people were originally talking about. She won Best Actress. The film played at Cannes that year, and she won the Best Actress award. Like she was a huge deal. Yeah. And everybody thought he was very good too. It wasn't like everybody was like, who the fuck is this guy? But it is interesting how their paths sort of diverged after that. That she didn't work much more, which is, I think, a loss. I think there's I agree. There's a real skill there. The other sort of thing that I do love though about Pacino in this, that Schatzberg confirmed for me, this was a story I had heard, but always sort of secondhand, was that when Coppola was working so hard to cast Pacino, famously, bucking the odds and and the wishes of studio executives to have him play Michael, this film hadn't come out yet. Coppola was working purely on gut and on seeing him on stage and on his screen tests. So he did ask Schatzberg if he could come into the editing room and just see some finished sequences, just to make sure that his feeling was right about this guy's ability to hold the camera and sustain a scene. And so he did. He came in and he showed him some scenes, and Coppola said, "Yep, that's what I needed to see. Thank you," and headed out.
Right. And I know that also convinced Paramount. There was like 8 minutes or so in it that they thought, okay, we'll cast him. And he has an anger about him, which is I don't know if I should necessarily say it's a rare quality, but let's just say I don't see it often, so perhaps it is a rare quality. But when he gets mad, he doesn't just get mad, his anger is very violent. I mean, when he gets mad in these scenes, you can really feel it. When he finds out that she's been working as a prostitute and she in the apartment is just screaming at her, and she hides in the bathroom. And even towards the end of the film, when she is in a position where she has to rat on him or else go to prison, and she's just lying in bed, and he doesn't even know why she's, catatonic all of a sudden. And, just the way he takes the covers off of her and says, smarten up and get some clothes on. There's just a rage there. That is a rare quality. And I imagine just his talent, as well as he had a hard upbringing himself, right? So I'm sure that
Right.
is part of it.
No, I mean, I think this was that quality was a big part, I think, of both what made this performance so electrifying, and you see some of that 2 years later in De Niro, or the next year, sorry, in De Niro's performance in Mean Streets.
Yes,
That the
yes.
moments where suddenly these guys are like, it's like a live wire, you're actually worried they're gonna hurt somebody,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
The degree to which they're able to put across that electric kind of dangerous anger, I think first of all, it's something that they don't, that you're right, that kind of softened in their own acting, much as, to something closer to kind of what Brando is doing. There's certainly no shortage of Pacino shouting and being angry in later movies, but it
Right.
never feels as dangerous
No,
as
it
it does.
doesn't. Yeah. Yeah. No, it really was from these roles that started with this. And, you saw in Serpico and in Godfather
Yeah.
too. I mean, and Dog Day Afternoon.
Yes.
And no, it's stunning. But the character of Helen, again, as you said, I mean, the audience, it's an ambiguous film in a lot of ways, and you have to put things together on your own. You have to really kind of go to it. And Helen, for example, Bobby's a little easier to figure out why he is the way he is, but Helen, for
Right.
example, we don't know much about her other when they're having lunch on the grass early in the film after they meet. She just says she's from Indiana, she went to art school, and it was fine. So you don't,
Yeah.
she's very vague and distant about her past. And when you see her getting to know Bobby and very quickly falling in love with him, and at first, I was laughing this time. Does have a black humor about it when he's introducing her to all of his friends and Hank, his brother. He's so casual about it, as if she's already part of that world. He's like, "Oh, this is Hank. He's a robber.
Right.
No big deal." Yeah. And,
Right.
you see
Yes.
at first she is uncomfortable at first, and then gradually she becomes very much a part of that world, and she becomes a
Yeah.
prostitute. She becomes an addict. So you don't really know why she loves this guy so much. And again, it's the way the wind blows, right? You can never pin down why someone
Right.
loves anyone. You can speculate, well, they
Right.
have this in common or this or whatever. But it's a feeling, it's a connection, and we don't know. We just accept it. And I don't know if you felt that there was something you saw in it that was appealing about him for her. I mean, I was curious if you had any thoughts on that.
I mean, I think honestly, first of all, I buy the romance mostly because their chemistry as actors is
Really
so
good.
good
Yeah.
and so convincing. Like I feel like they like each other and care for each other. And then also, honestly, he also finds her at a moment of great vulnerability,
That's true.
and
Because of the
is kind to
abortion
her.
off the
Yeah,
top.
and
Yeah.
is kind to her in a way that her old man, at the moment, very young Raul Julia, is
Oh, right.
not.
That's
You
true.
know
Yeah.
that and that honestly a lot of times is what manipulative partners will do, and he is, obviously this was not a good relationship for her to get into. Is they see vulnerability, they see weakness, they see a way that they can convey care, um and exploit that. And I
Mhm.
think there's a little bit of that too. Also, you know what, he's also young Al Pacino. He was extremely hot. He's
He's a
he's
handsome guy,
very,
man.
very charismatic.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
real. He's and with the sort of proper background that she mentions, like it's probably fun initially to the danger of a guy who'll just like lift a TV out of a truck,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
sell it so he can buy you a picnic lunch. Like, I'm sure that all is, that can seem like fun until it isn't.
Right.
Which is kind of the subtext of most drug movies. Like, it's a lot of fun
Yeah.
until it isn't,
Until it isn't. Yeah, no, that's a good point. And she, what I found also, another discovery for me in this one was the fact that, again, because as we said, the way it's cut, um scenes end abruptly and they go into the middle of the next scene, and that there's a part of the story, what I like about the film is like this endless cycle of, they're in a good mood because they've got some money and because they can get drugs, and then they get high,
Yep.
and then they're out of money, and now they're pissed off because they can't get drugs, and it's just this
Yep.
endless cycle. But there's a point in the film where he can
Yep.
suddenly become what he calls a supplier, which I suppose is like a drug dealer. And you see him go in and he gets all these drugs, and it's like, he's wearing a mask like we're all wearing now with COVID. And, he takes all these piles of cocaine. And then right after that, he's outside, he's joking around with his friends. Everybody is having a good time. And what I noticed this time is that Helen is the only one not having a good time. And right after that, he's down again, sitting with Hank. Now Hank is addicted. As he said earlier, he was just chipping.
Right.
And she's like, "Hey, where's the drugs? Why is there no more drugs?" And he says, "Well, I gotta save some in case I get busted, because then I need to sell the drugs to raise money to hire a lawyer." And then immediately after that, he goes to his stash and it's gone. And then he gets mad at her, blames her. And I always believed her. I don't know how you felt when she said, "I didn't know where it was. It must have been Chico or one of the other guys." And then he goes, "I told you." And I realized, oh, she probably took it. I don't know. I mean, the story, they don't tell you, right? And then he can't get any more. How is the supplier going to give him more? As he says, "I can't get any more." And then boom. I don't know if you gave much thought to that sequence, because that is something I really never really thought about.
Right. No, I mean, I think that is one of the great things about a movie like this. And honestly, I mean, I don't mean to get too global with it, but about a lot of the great movies of the 70s, is that because they were working out of this sort of more abstracted morality, that they didn't feel like they had to tell you everything. They didn't feel like they had to tell you everything story-wise. They didn't feel like they had to tell you everything morally. And like, Helen is a much more sympathetic character than Bobby, but she also kind of does some fucked up stuff too,
Yeah, that really popped out to me too this time. I mean, she rats on him, she steals the drug.
Yeah. And that, I think, is a big difference between when you think about a movie like that then and now, is that, when you tell a story like this now, you have to give the audience, a likable protagonist. You have to give, you would have to make Helen more of a clear victim than she is here.
Right.
And what I think is sort of interesting, and I don't, to be clear, I'm not accusing them of this. I do think it's very instructive to compare the film to the movie that it most clearly directly inspired, which is the Safdie brothers' Heaven Knows What.
I still have to see that. I've been meaning to see it because I love them.
It's worth seeing. Yeah. It's worth seeing, but it's a very direct. I mean, they've acknowledged it. They're not, fucking around about it. It is about, heroin addicts, street kids, gutter punks in New York, but in, 2010s New York, as opposed to 1970s New York. And so in many ways, it's sort of a continuation, or sort of a revisitation, or how does that story work in that version of New York? And in those ways, it's really fascinating to watch them together. The balance of storytelling in that one is much more geared towards her. It's much more her story. She is much more of the victim in it. She, again, is not, doesn't come out clean, like does, some bad things herself, but the sort of Bobby-ish character, who's played by Caleb Landry Jones, is much less sympathetic than she is a much harder and more exploitative, abusive character than even Bobby is in this. So it's kind of instructive to look at those two films, in comparison with each other.
Yeah, I'll have to see that, because this is the beauty of particularly this decade, is that characters, these people are, morally complicated, and they're not necessarily
Yeah.
bad, but they have to do bad things. And in this story, as the police say, a junkie will always rat in order to get out of jail, or get out of jail early, and so
Yeah.
on and so forth. I just want to mention some of the supporting cast, because the supporting cast in this is incredible. Richard Bright, of course, is Hank, and we later saw him in The Godfather. Alan Vint as Hotch, the cop. Keel Martin, who's, when that scene when they're all doing heroin and they really focus on him. I mean, it's so realistic. Jesus, I mean, it looks like they're
Yeah.
actually doing it. And they
Yeah.
focus on him, and his eyes just, are so glazed over as he just falls over after getting that hit. And it's really, really stunning. Of course, Raul Julia, who we mentioned, Marcia Jean Kurtz, who you'd see in, a number of New York films. And of course, you recently passed away Paul Sorvino's in one scene. Arnold Williams, you saw him in a lot of 70s films. It's so good. And as Pacino said,
No,
it's
this
Romeo
is
and Juliet on dope, or on heroin.
no, that cast, a thing that it never really occurred to me before I talked to Jerry Schatzberg about this movie was, part of the reason that you see such rich supporting cast so often in these great New York movies is that he said, we had our pick of the best actors on Broadway. Like, these were people who at night were headlining major Broadway plays and off-Broadway plays, who were the stars, but who had no problem at all coming and spending a couple of afternoons making a little extra money shooting a part in a film. And then everybody wins. We get a terrific actor in a small role. They get a nice piece of change. They're still, a stage actor at heart. And there's a whole sort of other story to be told about that system and the way that, the great New York casting agents, like Marion Doherty Juliet Taylor and all of them were plugged into that stage scene, and how they took advantage of pipeline when they were casting these great New York movies. There's a wonderful documentary called Casting By.
Oh, it's so good. I love it.
That gets into some of that stuff. But yeah, he said that specifically about this movie, that he loved that he was able to fill out his cast with stage actors, with just great stage actors.
Yeah, no, everyone is perfectly casted. And one thing about the film is that, even though Bobby finds out that Helen, became a prostitute and slept with his brother, and I mean, just God, these things that are, so twisted. And he's very angry at first, but even at the end when he gets ratted on and then he gets out of jail and Helen's there and he just says, well, and it's just, they just walk away together. And I think that he just kind of came to be like, I don't like it, but this is the way it is, so it's just this, I remember in Pickup on South Street, the noir, the film noir, there was that element of just of a street level understanding that we're going to have to sometimes do bad things to each other in order to get out of jail or to get drugs. And we'll all be together through it.
Yes.
Exactly. I don't know if it's necessarily as optimistic as I'm putting it, but it's so good. Was there anything else you wanted to mention about this film?
No, I mean, we pretty much covered it. It was a lot of fun to talk to both of them about putting it together. And one of my favorite stories from the whole book was Adam Hollander told me that, when they were sending in the dailies to 20th Century Fox, after the first few days, the studio executives were sending back angry memos like, oh my God, where's the Empire State Building? Where's the New York skyline? Why are we paying to shoot this movie in New York if you can't tell that it's in New York? And it's like, we can tell it's in New York. It's just not the New York you're used to, which, right. I love that. I love anytime we're seeing a part of the city that, that maybe we're not seeing in 53 other films.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. And now there's you have the podcast as well. And I know that you started the Fun City podcast because there's just so much to talk about, and you wanted to talk about more. And I listened to the episode on Joe, which is a film I really like. And I thought that was an excellent episode. was really, really
Thank you.
interesting about all the hard hat riots.
Thank
I
you.
didn't know anything. I didn't know anything about that. So where's the best place
Yeah.
for people to follow you on social media and to check out the podcast?
Yeah, like I said, the Instagram for Fun City Cinema is that it's all one word, Fun City Cinema. Lots of great images from the New York movies that I reviewed for the book. I'm on Twitter at Jason-Bailey with the dash spelled out. And you link to all my work there. And then the podcast is also called Fun City Cinema. It's available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, whatever your podcatcher of choice is. There's a total of 10 episodes of that. And like you mentioned, we wanted to sort of fill in some of the stuff that we couldn't get into in depth in covering 100 years. It is a nonfiction narrative storytelling podcast. It's like listening to a little audio documentary of about an hour and change, where we play clips, we do historical background, archival footage, we talk to actors, filmmakers, historians, critics, people who sort of fill us in on various aspects of the films there, and we're really proud of how that came out. It kind of became its own thing that sort of stands on its own.
Great, fantastic. And I'll leave the links in the description box below where you can follow Jason online, and again check out the podcast, as well as get the book, Fun City Cinema, New York City and the Movies That Made It. It's wonderful, really, really, really great book. And
available wherever fine hardbacks and ebooks are sold.
Yes, yes. I love I do so much reading on the subway, so it's it doesn't matter. You got to bring it on the train, even though it's a big book.
Yeah.
I love some of the looks you get sometimes, like there's like this big book, but
Yeah.
I didn't care. And just lastly, I wanted to thank your publicist Andrew Gabelli for putting us in touch at Abram's book. Thanks so much. And Jason, thanks so much. I really appreciate that you took the time to come out today and have this lengthy discussion about the book and Panic in Needle Park. So
thank you so much for having me and for supporting the book. I really appreciate it.
Anytime. And I hope you can come again sometime. Talk another one.
All right, man.
Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I want to thank all of my members on Patreon. If you're interested in becoming a member of my Patreon, head over to the link patreon.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies for full details. You can also leave a donation directly to my YouTube channel by pressing the thanks link, which you will find just below the video frame, right beside the like and dislike links. Just click the thanks link, and from there, you can leave a donation if you choose to. And lastly, if this is your first time here, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. It is absolutely free to do so. By pressing the Robert Bellissimo at the Movies logo, you will see it floating above my head in the top left corner to your top left. In just a second, just click on that. And then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release one of my new episodes. Thank you so much, everyone. I will see you in the next episode.